I'm working on the coolant line fittings for under the van. So here's the this is the heater. The two ports that come out are going to go straight up into the van, and this is going to represent the van floor. This is the old roof hole for the fans that I cut out, and I drilled a 1 3/8 inch hole. 1 3/8 inch hole to fit these 1 inch. This one, let's see what this one was. This was 1 inch MIP closed, so 1 inch all the way around. Here are my pieces. This looks pretty simple, but I was at Home Depot for about 2 hours trying to figure out all these connections, because these are on one aisle. This thing was in a totally different section. These were way in a different section, and these were in the electrical conduit section. So I was just running all over the place trying to figure this out. They didn't have any 1 inch rubber washers at Home Depot, so I just made some out of some rubber gasket material. It comes in like a square, and this isn't like for water tightness. It doesn't need to be watertight. This is just so there's no air gaps in between my fitting holes. So all I need is the inside of this and some of that thread, you know, that thread tape that goes on it to make that watertight. That's all I need. So basically this panel is going to act as the floor. And when you look at it, that's what it's going to look like. So coolant line goes in from the heater block out into this 1 inch adapter. Thread tape's going on this. I've got a lock nut that squeezes the rubber in between this one and this panel, just like so. And on the other side is the exact same thing. So it's like a little sandwich. So coolant runs straight through the floor of the van with no air gaps. If you watched my last video, this is where the engine block went, and then right in here is where my holes were supposed to be. So I went ahead and drilled my holes and already installed one fitting just to make sure it works. Okay, temporarily put my heater back in place. I pushed the coolant hose up to my first connection. I don't have anything to mark it. And I also replaced the ones that came straight out with these 90-degree coolant connectors that came in the kit. That came with it came with a whole bunch of different connectors. But right now I'm going to mark the bottom of this with my fingernail, and then I'm just going to cut it. And my coolant lines are now installed to my heater. It was a little tricky getting in there with these tight little spaces, trying to find the angles to tighten all the little clamps. I'm going to hook up back all my exhaust and my exhaust and my intake. I'm going to hook that back up. Okay, that is it for underside of the van, besides the fuel line that I got tied up here temporarily. Once I attach all the electronics, which will be tomorrow, I'm going to hook up the rest of my coolant lines in the van first tomorrow, and then I'll hook up the electrics, and then I can purge the fuel line to make sure the fuel will be sicked out of the gasoline diesel tank through the fuel line, and then I will attach this to the fuel inlet right there. That'll all be tomorrow, and a short jump for you guys. And good morning. It is a nippy 30-something degrees outside. Pretty chilly in the van. Glad we're installing a heater when it's cold. So now what I did was I attached a piece of plywood with some self-tapping screws above my input and output, and I also drilled a 1-inch hole to run my wires through the floor. I'm going to go get some waterproof conduit. It's like basically what I made here, but for electrical wires. And I kind of played around with the setup of it, but I'm going to have to fine tune it actually installed in here. So we'll see how it all works out. Okay, not gonna lie, I've been having some troubles with it, but I think I figured it out. I hooked up all the plumbing and all the electronics, which I'll show you how to do, and I was having trouble. So all the electronics were hooked up, everything seemed to be working fine. I turned on with this little remote control. The pump started. I heard the little gasoline or the diesel pump, like tick, 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 meaning it was pumping diesel. I heard the engine like a tiny little furnace. All was going well, but nothing was getting hot. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. So I went under there and I was like touching the cables, touching the wires, nothing was hot. Then I touched the furnace and I was like, ow! It was like super hot. I was like, okay, that makes no sense. So something's heating up. And then it was like 20 degrees last night working in the dark, and I was getting fed up with it, and I just couldn't think anymore. So I went inside, took a shower, and then it hit me. I hooked up my coolant lines backwards. So right now I'm remedying that. The whole system's filled with coolant, so I'm having to drain it out. And once it's all drained, I'm going to flip the 2 coolant hoses, and hopefully that'll get me heat. Okay, it's a new day, and this is now what my coolant system looks like. I had to get a new reservoir because the old one, I'll walk you through all the problems that I had to make it easier for you guys. So what I got now is a new coolant reservoir, and this is the only one I could find that has a 1-inch opening on the bottom and a 5/8 inch opening on the top, so there's more flow in the coolant lines. I think the other one, I don't have it in here, but the other one, the input and the output were just too small. It was like 1/4 inch, and I don't think it was just flowing. And this one also has a little an air valve, an air escape, a vent hole, and I think that's pretty necessary also. So compared to my other one where the pump was up here and the coolant thing was up here, I'm saving a lot of space up here, and everything's more consolidated down here. In the heat exchanger, I left some room underneath it to run my water lines. I'm going to run them through the floor, and then my water tank's going to sit over this wheel well. But the pump is now just floating there, being held by the coolant lines. And what's holding this reservoir on is the old pump mount. And there's a little clip on the back, just like this. There was no mounting holes. The clip looks like this, and I just put that over the back of the old, I don't know if you could see it, the old clip, the old holder for the water pump. Another problem I was having with the old system was the furnace is right under this, so when these hoses come up, I think it was just too long. And the system, once I flipped those going in and out, the coolant still was not flowing through the system, and that could have been because the holes for the input and output were too small. And I also went through it and I took off the exchanger and I dumped it, and there was no coolant coming out of the exchanger, so there was nothing flowing through the entire system. So I figured out that the coolant hose coming from the output of the furnace was too tall, and it just wasn't able to push it up through the exchanger. So having this with bigger openings above everything else. When I fill this, gravity does the work and it fills all the lines without having the pump even needed to work that hard. The only one is coming from this heater coming back in, but now when I turn it on, it'll recirculate, and it's like a little coolant fountain on the inside of that. And one very stupid problem that I had was the remote kept saying error, and I could not figure out what was happening with it and why it was saying error. So I'll take you under here. I put the pump on, even though I showed you guys in the last video how I was going to mount it, metal side down. This is the way it's supposed to go when you mount it sideways. I mounted it upside down, so the plastic part was down here. And I guess there is a check valve, one-way valve, where the coolant and the gas was just not pumping properly and the engine wasn't firing. But once I reversed it, having coolant spill all over me in my mouth in 20 degrees and just ridiculous amount of trouble for no particular reason, I got it working. And by flipping it over, the hole that I drilled for all my wires to go through the waterproof now it won't fit. So I'm gonna have to get a jigsaw and just make this opening a little bit bigger. On the top of the furnace, when it is mounted, I showed you guys how to mount it. I don't think I need to show you how to install the wires. There's just one wire on top where the remote connects to. The positive and the negative. Positive's red, negative's brown. And right here is the fuel pump that runs through this system. And then all this, there's a fuse holder right here. A 5 for the fuel pump, 25 for the furnace, and 25 for the coolant pump. And then this right here is a if you have problems with the system and you need to pull some codes, this is the little thing you would connect your code checker to figure out what the issue is. And then I just bunched up these wires and zip tied them to some open holes so those aren't going anywhere. I need to put this back in there, and my wires are connected. I reconnected my fuel line once I flipped it. The muffler going out the back or going down out the side. I also connected my fuel pump wire, and I zip tied it to the gas line, taking it through these existing holes and then coiling up and then zip tying it to the rest of the fuel line. And that is about it for wire connections. But that is the orientation it needs to go in to work properly. I feel bad for not showing you how all this was set up and me doing the entire process, but for me it was trial and error. I drained the entire coolant system like 5 times, just trying to figure out proper flow and why things weren't working until I figured out the furnace was upside down. But I did test it up. I plugged it into a battery, and well, I'll do that for you. I'll show you. Is the positive and the negative coming through the floor. The negative is brown, and the positive, they wrapped it in some heat shrink wire so it looks black. But that's the positive. Remote battery's all hooked up. Remote, you go through the settings, and here is the little squiggly arrows are the actual burner. So I'm just going to set it to 30 minutes, and I still got to figure out the remote and how to do it. So right now it says on, so you'll hear the fuel pump kick on. And right now it's sucking coolant. Maybe 30 seconds later, you'll hear the fuel pump underneath the van will go like tsk, 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 tsk. I don't know if you can hear it. That's the fuel pump pumping diesel into the engine. And then you'll hear the engine will go whoosh. Let's see if you can hear it. I don't think you heard it, but I'm gonna take you outside and show you the exhaust. Right here, I don't know if you can see it in the video. It's very clean. It only spits out a little bit of exhaust. You can feel it blow on your hand, and you can kind of hear the engine. It's pretty quiet. And that'll run, heating up your coolant, so the coolant lines will get hot. Okay, I think it has to get hot and kind of run a couple times for it to start working properly. Because I was a little nervous there. It just popped up and said error again, and I was like, oh no. But I restarted it, and now the coolant is flowing like a little waterfall on the inside. And it's seems to be working fine, and I can hear the heater still on. So that's good. And when you feel the lines, they're warm, getting warmer. And my little heater blower, the way it works, it has 3 wires, yellow, orange, red. One's low, medium, high, and that's just fan speed. So all it is, it just blows blows the fan over another exchanger on the inside of the heater. I turned it on for a little bit when it was really cold in here, and it made it warmer. And when you feel it, it only makes it made it like, you know, like kind of warm. It wasn't hot air, it was warm air. But I think once this is not really closed off, I'm still going to have some airflow going through it. But once it's kind of in its own little thing, and there's insulation around it, that the air inside of this will be warmer, so it'll suck in warm air, blow in warm air over a heat exchanger, making it even hotter. Hopefully that's the idea. But if that's not the case, it's still a lot better than it being really cold in here. And this, it just comes with a little like a negative wire. And here's the, let's see if you can see it, low, medium, high, off. And on the back, it's those little prong connector, crimp connectors, and the positive will connect to this wire. And you will put, it says with this heater, it takes a 7.5 amp fuse. So now that that is finished, I'll take you on a little video tour showing you how you can connect everything. And of course I'll leave descriptions for this coolant container. I think it comes from like a 2005 Mazda or something like that. And it was like the perfect coolant reservoir to use. So I'll leave a description for that. I left one in the last video for the Heaters for You S-Bar unit that I have. And it just came with the wires, the pump, and the actual furnace. And the, you know, like fuel line, zip ties, and a few connectors for coolant hoses and stuff. And I think it came with like a 5-foot 3/4 inch coolant hose. But all the everything else that I used required like 5/8 inch coolant hose. All the other mechanisms to this. But so here's a little walkthrough. Coolant reservoir drops down into 1 inch coolant hose going into my fuel pump, which is levitating by this hose and this hose, and it's pretty sturdy. It's not going anywhere. You don't want to put this against anything because it'll vibrate and you'll hear that shaking. So like having it like levitating like that, I think works fine. And it goes right out into my input of the furnace underneath, through the floor, through my little jerry-rigged waterproofer connector things, and it comes out and goes into my heat exchanger from the bottom, pushes itself up through the exchanger, so I'm definitely getting some coolant in there. It's coming out the top and going into my blower. And why I have it going into my blower last is because I want my hot water. I want as hot of water as I can get. So going into the exchanger first, the water will run into the top, come out the bottom. You want to do it the opposite of flow of your coolant. So coolant's going in the bottom, out the top. I want to have my water going in the top and out the bottom. That way they're crossing each other and they're definitely getting as much surface area getting hot as possible. So I got it going in the bottom, out the top, into my heater, out of my heater, back into the top of the coolant. And I don't have it filled all the way to where it should be, but it's flowing in, and it's continuously flowing. You could tell by the bubbles, and it starts bubbling once it gets a little hot. And the blower I have, it doesn't have it said the 9-inch, which this one is. It's a little one. They make a 16 inches a little longer, and that one definitely has an input and an output. He said these do not matter. It's not labeled. It doesn't matter. You can go in the top, out the bottom, in the top, whatever. Doesn't matter. So as long as it's going through it. Down, just press this button. It says off, and then you hear the pump stop, and that is off. And the screen will go black, like it just did, and I touched it. But the screen goes black, and that's off. Okay, that is it for my hydronic heating system. Next, I'm going to install my water tank over the wheel well and install, probably the same video, I'll install my PEX pipe. They only had red and white 1/2 inch. They didn't have any blue. But this is the same as the blue stuff that you see in plumbing. So it's just white. So what I got going on my floor is 3/4 inch aluminum that I'll glue to the floor, and I'll use this to screw my subfloor down, where I will put my regular floor on top of the subfloor on top of this. And the reason I got this is for the rigidity in 3/4 inch aluminum, and my PEX pipe is 1/2 inch, and I'm going to be running it through the floor. So I'm going to have 1/2 inch PEX pipe guarded by the 3/4 inch aluminum struts. That way I don't risk crushing my PEX pipe. So if you guys have any questions, please ask. I hope I hit some key points on how to install one, turning the furnace the right way. Going in the in, out the out, attaching the wires properly, having the coolant reservoir above all the other lines. I think those are some just simple, common sense things that maybe could be overlooked. I don't know. I'm sure with instructions it goes through every single one of those things, but I was just figuring out myself. But for you guys, I hope you learned from what I've done and that it will start the first time for you. But thanks for watching it, and please comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and see you later.